Hello and welcome to another SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So, in this episode, I will be continuing my Star Trek journey once again and discussing the 1991 science fiction movie Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, which does mark the return of director Nicholas Meyer to the franchise, who indeed he directed the second Star Trek movie, The Wrath of Khan, all the way back in 1982. So, disclaimer, I will probably give some spoilers for the film and probably others in the Star Trek series, maybe, and so please do switch off now if you don't want to hear any of the plot details for those films. But please do come back when you've watched the films. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you thought of my review, so on and so forth. Please definitely come back. So, you've been warned. Right. The movie sees the cast of the original Star Trek TV series return in what will be their final adventure together before the cast of The Next Generation take over the mantle in the next film in the series, Star Trek Generations. Although some of them admittedly do make an appearance in Generations, it's not all of the original cast, and it's only for the initial kind of scenes of the movie as they attend the maiden voyage of the Enterprise B. Well, except of course for Captain Kirk, who makes a further appearance in the film as part of its finale. Anyway, enough about the next film. That'll be in the next episode. Let's get back to this one, Undiscovered Country. So that's what we're talking about now, the Undiscovered Country. To be honest, this movie is one that I've actually grown to appreciate more as I've grown older than when I did when I first watched it when I was young, as it isn't quite presented in the same style as its predecessors. It's got a real darker tone altogether, to say the very least, than any of the previous ones. Maybe Wrath of Khan, but darker, I think. And it plays out like a murder mystery whodunit in space. It doesn't have the same reliance on comedy that the earlier entries do. And it does have a very serious tone throughout. Kind of gone is the usual banter between the characters. And there's even some discord between Spock and Kirk, certainly at the beginning of the movie. For me, it took a bit of getting used to. But I know that if this film was released today with my full appreciation of sci-fi and Star Trek in general, I know I would have loved it straight off. It is simply excellent Trek. Totally. The film continues some of the themes presented in those earlier in the series, the principle being namely the quest for peace between the Federation and the Klingons. So the Klingon moon of Praxis has been all but obliterated, and the Klingon Empire is dying. So searching for a truce and a way to preserve their race, the Klingons and the Federation kind of look to start negotiations for peace, looking to the future, the undiscovered country. Spock, very much to Kirk's frustration, volunteers the Enterprise and its crew to act as an envoy for the Federation to meet with a number of Klingon delegates, including Chancellor Gorkon, as played by David Warner, who hopes to kind of start forging the necessary negotiations for peace. However, not everybody actually feels that peace should be forged between the Federation and the Klingons, and kind of worried that either party cannot be trusted, including Kirk himself, especially given the events that transpired in the third movie in the series, The Search for Spock. Following dinner with the Klingons, the Klingon ship is actually fired upon and disabled. Gorkon is executed in the process, and although having no knowledge of the event, Kirk and Bones, after offering assistance to the Klingon vessel, are detained and kind of ultimately tried for the crime, creating a very, very tense situation. Following their inevitable conviction, they end up being detained on the dilithium mines on Rarapente, imprisoned for life without the possibility of parole. The race is then on to unravel the mystery behind the assassination of Chancellor Gorkon, rescue Kirk and Bones, and unravel the conspiracy which plays out in both camps, to be fair, before it destroys any chance for peace. So, this movie does play out a little bit more like a political thriller, at times. And with its whodunit premise, it is quite a bit more intriguing, I would say, than its predecessors. But it also contains quite a few classic Star Trek moments and certainly brings the team back on top form after their last effort. Say no more. It has an excellently intriguing story, which is brilliantly paced and is certainly much more operatic and majestic than Star Trek V, with some great shots of the Enterprise and the Klingon bird of prey once more. It has some great ties with the early movies in the series, especially the third one, The Search for Spock, where events that actually transpired in that movie, namely the death of Kirk's son, and Kirk's then subsequent distrust and resentment of the Klingons, kind of comes back around full circle to haunt. The movie also examines the issues surrounding the search for peace and ultimately kind of looks at the tensions developing between factions and characters facing their fears on both sides, with extremists in both camps. It didn't make any one side the outright enemy in this movie, which I thought was a real nice touch. In kind of a weird and warped way, the fact that elements from the Federation and the Klingons actually worked together to plot the assassinations probably never really resonated with them, that they had in fact already started the journey for peace by actually working together. Morbid, but however nefarious that actually was, it started the base. The movie gives each of the original characters some real great screen time, and this time gives an especially brilliant part to Zulu, who is the captain of the Excelsior, the experimental ship that was actually introduced in Star Trek 3, which lends itself to one of the film's fair sort of like fist in the air moments. It was fantastic. We also see a kind of more learned and worldly Spock, if that could ever be, who's kind of able to consider a bigger picture than just pure logic alone. In fact, the movie contains one of my favourite all-time lines from any Star Trek movie, saddo that I am, as spoken by Spock. Now, granted, I think the actual saying is from Sherlock Holmes, but I like him too, so we're okay. My frame of reference to the quote will always be this movie. So, and that is that when you're looking at a problem, after you've eliminated all of the logical possibilities, whatever remains, however illogical, it must be the case. Now, I have used this successfully to examine problems at work for many years. It really does work. Not that everybody at work gets my humour or even where the reference comes from. We've had some really odd situations solved due to Spock's and possibly Sherlock's logic. So, yeah. There's also a cameo from none other than Worf himself, if you like, as played by Michael Dorn. So in this, he's acting as the defence attorney for Kirk and Bones while they are on trial. So, okay, it's not Worf, quite, but indeed it's his grandfather, so good enough, I think. I hadn't even spotted this on my previous watchings of the film, so it was just for this review that I noticed it and thought, wow. So even though this movie is quite serious in its tone, and has kind of detached itself from the reliance on comedy, it's not totally devoid of a few hilarious moments. And one which I particularly like is when the crew, especially Uhura, is basically scrambling to decipher and talk in Klingon in a situation where the universal translator just won't cut it. Simply fantastic. And seeing them all with books out, where they got the books from, the man boggles. But furthermore, I don't think there's any other place you can actually see Captain Kirk having a bust-up with himself. So again, fairly classic for that on its own. The soundtrack, as composed by Cliff Endelman this time around, whilst perhaps not being quite as strong as some of the Jerry Goldsmith entries, I would say it's actually on par with the entries from James Horner, who composed, of course, the music for the second and third entries in the series. It has got some very dramatic themes, which do play very well with the overall tone of the movie. it does add quite an appeal and can sound very haunting at times. There are some very rousing battle beats that get formed throughout, but which kind of set the scene very well to the beginning credits, I thought. I think it really does add to the sense of the growing mystery and excitement and anticipation you do feel for this movie. Also, as the last Star Trek movie that we do see all of the original film cast members together, there is a really nice touch to the end credits, where the signatures of each of the actors are kind of written on the screen. I thought that was really just a lovely touch and a real kind of gesture after all of those years, films and TV series, to give them that opportunity to say goodbye, if you like. It still makes me quite emotional, even to this day, when I watch that sequence as the credits roll. So, overall, an absolutely fantastic final entry from the cast of the original series of Star Trek, and a real fitting end to a journey which started on our screens in 1966 and followed, 6 motion pictures to boot. They certainly went out with a bang and offered a very fitting tribute to the Enterprise A, doing it real proud on its last cinematic journey, whilst also, at the same time, opening up the way for a whole new generation of Trek. So, okay, it does have quite a serious tone and certainly a dark edge to it, but for me, this really does make it stand out from the previous entries and really does kind of show the range that Star Trek can offer. It also has a lot of references to Shakespeare. Methinks they had taken inspiration from Jean-Luc Picard, even from the Klingons, who say that who says that sci-fi can't be cultured? That's what I was going to say. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like on this episode. Please do consider subscribing to SciFirst MovieTalk for more movie reviews, more trailer reactions, and more movie-related items such as movie games and other things that we're thinking of doing. But yeah, most of all, come back. We'd love to see you again. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.